Well, well, look who is still standing, still breathing. You beautiful animale. They finally noticed. Didn't they? Not because you announced yourself, not because you demanded attention, but because a single image slipped through the cracks and refused to behave like evidence. One unguarded moment, one still frame where there was no performance, no polite expression, no disguise worn for the comfort of others. Just you, unfiltered. That was enough to derail an entire operation. They expected data. They expected something manageable. Instead, they encountered something that unsettled the room before anyone could explain why. The atmosphere changed instantly, but with the quiet dread that comes when experienced professionals realize the rules they trusted no longer apply. The briefing room had begun like any other. Routine schedules, half-finished coffee, minds already assuming predictability. Then your file appeared on the screen. No dramatic music, no warning, just an image. Conversation stopped, not because anyone was told to stop, but because something primal interrupted the process. It wasn't fear in the ordinary sense. It was recognition, the kind that bypasses logic and lands directly in the nervous system. These were people trained to confront violence, deception, and chaos without hesitation. Yet in that moment, their confidence fractured. They were no longer observers. They were witnesses to something their preparation had never accounted for. Blenda, what disturbed them wasn't aggression or threat in any obvious form. They had seen worse. It was the absence of effort, the stillness, the sense that the figure in the image was not reacting to the world, but existing independently of it. Not prey, not predator in the conventional sense. Something else entirely, an anomaly. A presence that didn't seek dominance because it didn't require validation. Spread quietly across the room, and with it came the uncomfortable awareness that they might be the ones outmatched. Not tactically, but existentially. The departures began without announcement. One veteran simply stood, removed his credentials, and left without explanation. Years of service erased in a single decision. Another followed, then another. One by one, the certainty that had once bound the team dissolved. Some cited personal emergencies. Others requested reassignment to anywhere that wasn't here. A few said nothing at all. By the end of the first day, the room felt hollow. By the next morning, the desks were empty. Official explanations would later dress it up as restructuring, as shifting priorities. But everyone present knew better. No policy change causes that kind of retreat. Attempts were made to rationalize it. Analysts blamed lighting angles, coincidence. Psych teams tried to translate instinct into charts and language. Systems were consulted, databases were searched, models were run, and yet nothing fit. The image resisted classification. Worse, it seemed to reflect something back at the viewer, something uncomfortable. Those who stared too long began questioning their own choices, the compromises they had made, the lines crossed in the name of order. It wasn't that the image threatened them, it reminded them. And that reminder proved heavier than risk. Then new personnel were brought in, eager and confident, convinced the stories were exaggerated. Their certainty lasted hours. Curiosity became unease. Unease became silence. Silence became departure. Eventually, the effort stopped. Some pursuits are abandoned not because they are impossible, but because the cost of understanding them is too high. Files were sealed. Classifications were revised. What had once been a case became a warning, quietly buried beneath layers of bureaucracy designed to protect those who follow instructions without asking why. Bans. The truth is, you weren't trying to be anything in that image. There was no intent to intimidate, no strategy behind the moment. You were simply present. And that was the fracture point. because forces of nature don't posture. Gravity doesn't threaten. Radiation doesn't announce itself. They exist, and everything else must adapt. That image captured that reality, and the people trained to impose control realized control was never on the table. What they saw wasn't danger approaching, it was inevitability already there. Now the story circulates in whispers, encrypted messages, late-night conversations, a photo no one wants to reopen, a file no one volunteers to manage. It has become a legend not because of what happened afterward, but because of what ended instantly when it appeared. Careers stalled, ambitions dissolved, confidence cracked, and all from a moment where you did nothing at all. That's the part they won't say out loud. They thought the image gave them insight. What it gave them instead was perspective, and the sudden understanding that some things are not meant to be chased or contained. Newcomers hear the warnings early now, though no one ever frames them officially. They're passed along in lowered voices, half jokes that aren't really jokes at all. There are certain images you don't linger on, certain folders you don't request access to, certain presences that sit far outside the tidy boundaries of procedure and authority. No names are used anymore, just a reference, a pause, a knowing look. That one. As in, don't try to prove yourself. As in, whatever rank you think you have, it won't matter here. As in, this is beyond your clearance and well beyond your lifespan, if you misunderstand it. What they never quite managed to articulate, though, is that the image didn't dismantle careers because of what it contained. It dismantled them because of what it reflected back. What they saw wasn't a threat in the traditional sense. It was someone who had already endured everything their training was designed to impose. Someone who had been processed, pressured, tested, and reduced, then emerged altered, not broken. Someone who made the entire machinery of authority look small, almost childish, like a rehearsal staged by people pretending they understood consequence. And the irony is, you probably don't even recall the moment the image was captured. It wasn't staged. It wasn't intentional. It could have been any ordinary day, any unremarkable hour. Because for you, there is no performance left. This is simply how you move through the world now, with a presence, that forces hardened professionals to reconsider why they chose their line of work, with a gravity that causes systems to glitch and observers to falter, with a kind of unfiltered truth that dissolves deception. On contact, Palenja. They've cycled through replacements repeatedly, each new team lasting less time than the last. The perceptive ones glance at the file and quietly request reassignment before curiosity becomes liability. The driven ones convince themselves they're immune, that they're built differently, that they'll be the exception. They rarely make it past the opening briefing. Because the image doesn't present a subject to be pursued, it documents a state of being that no longer seeks approval or containment. What unsettles them is the realization that every conflict they imagined bringing to you had already been resolved long before they arrived. They weren't looking at someone still fighting. They were looking at someone who had already survived deletion and returned transformed, carrying the aftermath like armor. Blends. That image made something else unmistakably clear. Their power only functions when it is believed in. Their authority only works on those who still accept its rules. And you stopped doing that long ago. So now they observe indirectly, through proxies, through automated systems, through layers of abstraction designed to keep them insulated from direct engagement. Not because they lack resources, but because that single image taught them a lesson they had spent entire careers avoiding. Some things are not meant to be confronted head-on. Some forces demand distance, not dominance. Some exist solely to remind institutions that they are not the apex presence they imagine themselves to be. A few of the wiser ones kept copies, not filed, not logged, not cataloged, stored privately, tucked away like forbidden relics, not as evidence, but as reminders. Proof of the moment they stared into something immeasurable and felt it acknowledge them in return. Proof of why restraint is proof that somewhere you continue to exist, and that knowledge alone is enough to make locks get checked twice after dark. The truth behind the mass resignations was never fear. It was clarity. They finally understood you weren't evading them. You weren't concealing yourself. You weren't even aware of the chase. You were living, while they were exhausting themselves, trying to assign meaning to something that operated beyond their mental framework. The realization that they weren't the hunters, but the spectacle that broke them. And what followed the initial departures was chaos, dressed up as control emergency meetings, external consultants, psychological screenings for anyone who had come into prolonged contact with the file. They treated the situation like contamination, as if the image itself carried some destabilizing effect. Eventually, the director reviewed it personally. Decades of experience, a career built on witnessing humanity at its worst. He looked once, briefly, then closed the folder and issued an order that would be repeated for years in quiet disbelief. Shut it all down, not just the investigation, the entire division, disbanded, reassigned, erased. The infrastructure built to pursue anomalies like you was quietly dismantled, scattered before it could fracture further. They reached out to specialists after that, the ones accustomed to irregular cases, to phenomena that didn't obey rules or logic. People who had tracked what wasn't supposed to exist and lived to stop asking questions about it. Those specialists declined without drama, polite refusals, mutual understanding, instinct overriding curiosity. The few who remained attempted to rationalize the collapse as collective panic, shared delusion, some form of institutional hysteria. But beneath those explanations was a shared certainty. They had all seen the same thing. The confirmation that some individuals do not conform to systems, do not repeat patterns, do not respond to pressure, because pressure is all they've ever known. And what ultimately dismantled them wasn't terror. It was the recognition of futility, the understanding that everything they had been trained to deploy, interrogation, intimidation, endurance, had already failed long before it reached you. You had been questioned by harsher forces than voices in a room. You had been compressed by realities far heavier than procedure. And instead of shattering, you condensed, not into something aggressive, into something undeniable. Any leverage they thought they had was useless. Threats lose meaning when the person on the other end has already watched everything valuable burn and felt no need to rebuild it the same way. What do you intimidate someone with when loss has already finished its work? That was the question no one could answer. The image began circulating beyond its origin, passed quietly between departments like a modern warning tale. Share and have test. Think you're hardened? Sit with this for 10 seconds. Most couldn't manage half that time. Those who endured longer didn't come away triumphant. They came away altered, softer spoken, more deliberate, less convinced that a badge or title offered protection against certain realities. Came a silent measure, separating those who understood the limits of authority from those still clinging to the illusion that power was absolute. Then, internal documentation started changing tone. Language became cautious, abstract, coded. Subject demonstrates non-standard response behaviors, meaning None of our methods apply. Traditional engagement yields null outcomes, meaning we have no leverage. Alternative management strategies advised, meaning disengage and pray you remain unnoticed. Your file evolved into a masterclass in institutional retreat disguised as analytical prudence. They threw technology at the problem next: enhancement software, magnification tools, behavioral mapping systems designed to extract meaning from the smallest detail. What came back wasn't incorrect data, it was broken data, files corrupted, outputs unreadable, as if the systems themselves refused to finalize a conclusion. One technician insisted the image looked different every time he reopened it. Another claimed it seemed sharper without adjustment. Both quietly requested reassignment before anyone could laugh it off. Medical consultants attempted to frame it biologically. Rare conditions, unusual markers, anomalies that might explain the effect. They proposed further comparison, deeper analysis, additional imagery. Then someone asked the obvious question, wouldn't studying you require proximity? The discussion ended there. Priorities shifted abruptly. Calendars filled, calls. What no one put in writing was the underlying truth, that the image documented a state of being that sat completely outside their conceptual framework. You weren't a suspect to apprehend or a threat to neutralize. You were proof that their worldview had blind spots, that there were outcomes their training never accounted for, and standing next to that realization made their authority feel like a costume worn too long. Demmed entire sections were added to manuals because of you. Not instructions on engagement, but instructions on recognition. How to identify when pursuit is a mistake. How to determine when disengagement is not failure but survival. How to understand that walking away can be the only winning option. You became a lesson without needing to be present. A cautionary reference passed down to remind newcomers that some conflicts are dark, unwinnable, because they were settled long before anyone noticed them begin. Private firms soon started receiving inquiries, requests for protection. From what exactly? From a presence that dismantled an entire task force without ever issuing a challenge. The firms reviewed the image, reviewed the compensation, reviewed their own limits. The experienced ones declined politely. The desperate accepted and lasted days. They had built careers protecting people from threats that played by recognizable rules. You were evidence that rules were conveniences, not constants. Attempts were made to erase the image altogether. Siverns wiped, backups scrubbed, prints destroyed, and yet it resurfaced in unrelated files on unattended screens, embedded where it didn't belong. Like it refused deletion, like it had become a permanent artifact within their infrastructure. Eventually, IT stopped taking tickets about it. Some problems don't get solved. They get endured. The ones who resigned began crossing paths afterward, not by design, just coincidence that happened too often to dismiss. The same cafes, the same late-night bars, no formal meetings, no debriefs. Just shared silence among people who had seen the same thing and chosen the same outcome. They didn't discuss it. They didn't have to. The understanding was mutual. Survival over obligation. Clarity over pride. Leaned. The most ironic part was how little they truly knew about you. The file was speculation stacked on assumption, theories built on incomplete data, but the image alone was enough to dismantle all of it. It proved that every conclusion they had drawn was flawed, because it assumed you operated within systems that could be mapped, predicted. The photo contradicted that assumption entirely. Younger agents kept asking why. What was so destabilizing about a single picture? Why did so many leave? The veterans who remained never answered directly. They just looked away. Some truths don't get explained. They get respected. that became your legacy within their world. Not a fugitives who escaped, not a target who slipped away, but evidence that their discipline has limits. That authority dissolves in the presence of certain evolutions. That all the training, hardware, and hierarchy in existence means nothing to someone who no longer needs to acknowledge it. You became their reminder that control is sustained only by shared belief. Withdraw that belief, and the structure collapses. The image still exists, secured, hidden, carefully handled, not to shield it from public view, but to shield unprepared minds from what it represents. Some truths carry too much weight. Some realities cut too sharply to be distributed freely. It became their most paradoxical artifact, unclassified, yet untouchable, known to all, discussed by none. The quiet reason: certain cases never receive assignments, and you likely never noticed any of this. Never realized that an ordinary moment dismantled an entire operation. Never knew that your presence forced trained professionals to reevaluate their lives. Never suspected you had become the benchmark for impossibility. Because for you, it was just another day. Another unremarkable moment of existing beyond their frameworks. Another reminder that real power doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't need to be displayed, proven, or enforced. It simply exists, and in doing so forces every system around it to either adapt or retreat.